It's time. Welcome in. I apologize about the late start, but here we are. Thank you for joining me for another edition of the Front Office Podcast. I am your host, Pistols, and today we bring you why you will lose your league by week 4. And for whatever the case may be, most fantasy managers they spend months preparing. And, round 1, round 2, round 3, whatever the case may be, they think after they leave their draft, wow, I crushed it. My starting lineup is loaded. I'm in it. I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm winning this league. And the reality of it is that they really only drafted for week 1. Fantasy football is 15 weeks long. 15 weeks. And most people will have drafted for week 1 only. And that's just that. By week 4, when bye weeks start kicking in, you could really kind of start to tell who is going to take off with this league and who is not. Once those bye weeks start kicking in and you really kind of see whose teams are really taking shape and who's built for the long haul. You can tell as early as week 4 when the bye weeks start kicking in. Week 4 is really when fantasy football actually starts. Yes, you draft your team, and yes, you build a roster. You want it to be as pretty as possible. Of course, we all draft the best players, but once those bye weeks start kicking in, if you can't sustain your roster with the depth, then by week 4, it's really easy to tell who is going to make a playoff run and push for a championship in your league, and who's not. So, week 4 is when the bye weeks start. Injuries start piling up. We've seen so many week 1 injuries in the past. Prime example, Malik Neighbors last year, drafted incredibly high, probably a first round draft pick. He tore his ACL in week 1. And once that happens, yes, I understand injuries are random and you can't prepare for them, but it's really when your depth starts to matter in your fantasy football leagues, because if you didn't have anybody behind him that could get you a decent floor and a pretty high ceiling, then you were probably screwed from then on, right from week 1. But really you kind of decide when your league is really starting to take shape as far as leaderboards go, and who's on top and who's on the bottom. As soon as those bye weeks start to kick in, that's kind of how you can tell. I appreciate everybody for being here. Welcome in. Thank you for watching the episode. Today's fantasy reality check is that your week 4 in your fantasy leagues will tell all. Week 4 will be the telltale sign of who's gonna move on into the playoffs and who's not. I'm in a lot of fantasy leagues that allows us to trade draft picks year in and year out. Week 4 is when I really start to target kind of the weaker teams in the league. You can tell by the way that they have constructed their rosters and whether bye weeks affect them at all. Makes it easy to make a trade when you're looking at somebody who's staring at the bottom of the league. If I can trade a draft pick and continue my push towards the playoffs, then I'm going to do that. A lot of the time, draft picks are super sexy. Add in to any trade that makes sense for you, makes sense for the player that is on the decline. So. But yeah, week 4 will expose everything. The draft day illusion that people see, and that's the first thing that I want to talk about, is every single fantasy manager. It doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds after the draft ends or 30 days after the draft ends, they love their roster. Every single fantasy manager out there on day one, the minute the draft ends, will tell you they have the best roster. I hear it all the time. I've been playing fantasy football for a long time, and I've heard everything. In one of my leagues, we draft, and we used to pick the team that we would try and predict the team that would win the championship. Of course, you base it on the player name, what they did last season, and you don't really kind of get into the weeds of it, thinking, well, this guy's got really good depth. You just look at the starters and go, yeah, that's a winning roster. But for the most part, the problem that fantasy managers, the biggest thing that fantasy managers do is they evaluate a draft based on their starting lineup. They draft for week one. You can't draft for week one. You have to be able to draft for the long haul. Like I said, fantasy football is 15 or 16 weeks of the NFL season. By that time, you'll know who's going to be out there, who's going to kill it, and who's not. Usually, when those bye weeks start to kick in week 4. This is really kind of why draft grades are meaningless. I can draft a team and get an A+ according to whatever website it was that I used to draft with, whether it be Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper. All of them give you draft grades at the end, but they don't take into consideration everything that we talk about on the show. Is where's the situation, who's going to get the ball, who's not going to get the ball. Is it going to be a everybody eats type of situation like the Bills have, like the Packers have? Or is it going to be, it doesn't matter who I draft from the Rams and they're still going to get me points week in and week out? For the most part, but bye weeks reveal everything. By the time week 4 gets around, you're looking at a roster that you're going, okay, week 4, maybe I have a QB that's unavailable. Maybe I have a wide receiver or a flex is unavailable. Whatever the case may be, week 4 doesn't create roster problems. It really just exposes them. So when you're looking into your draft, you have to be mindful of bye weeks for every position, for every player that you draft. I don't want to draft 5 guys that have the same bye week. That does me no good. That's gonna do you no good. And really the reality of it is when you look at bye weeks, when they start, and it's so crazy to me too, and I've always said this, week 4 is crazy for bye weeks. It's so early in the season, especially if you're a team like the Bills or the Rams or 49ers or some of these teams that constantly make playoffs, the Eagles. It's really one of those things where you just have to be mindful of it, because yes, I would love to have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase on the same team and Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson and all these guys, but if they all have the same bye week, then that does me no good. And yes, you might sit there and think, okay, well, that's only 1 week that those guys are missing. True. But at the same time, if you have multiple guys on the same bye week, it just creates a headache that not a lot of people are really prepared to deal with. That loss in that week, if you have guys in the same bye week, can really make or break your season. It might not seem it, but when you see all these guys and your starting lineup suddenly just has 7 holes in it, it's just one of those things where it's just like, I don't really know how I did that. I wasn't paying attention when I drafted, but that's just it. I mean, it exposes all the problems that you have with your draft. You want to draft. You want to draft for depth. You have to have the depth on your roster, whether it be guys. And your depth guys are the ones that you're kind of looking out. Okay, yeah, where can I throw this guy in a bye week situation? But at the same time, your depth is guys that like maybe you can throw in and week out because they show consistency. The type of consistency that you want to see in fantasy football is guys that will score the same amount of points week in and week out. And I know that sounds obvious, and I know that sounds, yeah, like you're probably saying, oh, pistols, no kidding. I want a guy that's going to be consistent every week. Yeah, of course you do. But when it comes down to drafting for bye weeks, you have to have that depth, and being able to have that flexibility in your roster is just gonna skyrocket you to the top, basically. Being able to account for guys that are missing time, guys that won't be on the field week, for whatever week, whether it be because of a bye week or because of injury. And I know injuries are random and you can never predict them, but you kind of can follow a trend. Guys like Jalen Waddle, for example, he was a highly drafted guy out of Miami for all those years before he got traded, obviously, to Denver. But he's a guy it's just like, I'm taking a risk on this guy. I know Saquon Barkley has had some knee injuries, and I know he's played most of the games, but Christian McCaffrey is probably the biggest one in the running back position, to where he has had multiple knee injuries that sidelined him week in and week out, and you kind of didn't really know what you were going to do if he was on your roster, and who can replace him. Obviously, the answer is nobody can replace Christian McCaffrey. He's one of the best running backs in the league. But for the most part, as long as you have that depth behind you, if you have a guy that you can fill in that's going to get you consistent points week in and week out, that's what you look for. Because your depth is what wins championships. They're won by the depth that you have on your roster. The manager who can survive injuries, who can survive the bye weeks, and who has the least volatile situation going on with whatever players that they have on their roster. Those are the guys that are going to make it to the playoffs. So those are the guys that are going to make a pretty deep playoff run, if not win the championship. If you can survive those, then that is what that's what you want to draft for. Regardless of how pretty someone's starting lineup looks, you have to look deeper into it, and that's the point of everything that I'm saying today, and the point of the channel is to kind of get you guys to think a little differently when it comes time to draft your teams. You have to be able to account for and like I said, injuries are random. You have to account for bye weeks, you have to account for injuries. Injuries are random, they happen, but you want to be able to fill that position to where you're not going to skip a beat. And the perfect example, if you're looking at an NFL team comparison, the 49ers are the best team in the league. They have the best system. They can throw anybody in there and not skip a beat. We see Brock Purdy get injured year after year, and whoever their backup is, last year was Mac Jones. The year before that was Sam Darnold. They came out, they played well, they won games for the 49ers. They made the playoffs regardless of the injuries to the starters. George Kittle gets hurt probably every single year, misses 3 or 4 games. Last year, I think he missed like 8 games, which was crazy because the tight end position is so scarce. But the guy behind him, Jake Tonges, put up numbers. He had a very high floor. His ceiling was uncapped. It was just one of those situations where it doesn't matter who's playing, whether it be Brock Purdy, Mac Jones, George Kittle, Jake Tonges, whatever the deal is. They're a well-oiled machine. They have the system in place that works for them, week in and week out. It doesn't matter who's put in there, and that's how you have to think about fantasy football too, is because when those bye weeks happen, when those injuries happen, who do I have to replace these guys? Am I going to get consistent points? And a lot of people are going to, you're going to sit there and you're going to look at your roster and you're going to go, oh my God, well, the guy that I'm putting in is not going to have the, Justin Jefferson production. He's not going to have the Puka Nacua production. No, of course not, because those guys are anomalies. Dreams, what's up, man? Appreciate you for being here. Depth is everything. Waivers are everything too. You're right. Knowing who to pick up and who not to pick up. I think I'm gonna have a waiver wire episode one of these days coming in the coming weeks. But yeah, I mean it has to. Injuries are not bad luck. They're really not. It's just one of those things that you have to account for. It's the NFL. It's a violent game. Football is a violent sport. Guys are bound to get hurt. You just have to be able to move past it with the guys that you draft behind your starting lineup to where, okay, and like I was saying, a lot of people are going to get in their own head about, they're not going to have these production. Well, if I have a starting lineup that plays well and I have guys on my bench that are producing well, for example, we'll say Puka Nacua gets me 20 points, but then a guy on my bench gets me 25 points. Well, instead of thinking, well, shit, I should have started that guy instead of Puka Nacua, and I would have scored more points. It's now the way that you should be thinking is, okay, I think I'm okay if Puka Nacua goes down, that I have somebody behind him that is going to be, I'm going to be okay in the long run. You're going to hear people all season long. They're going to sit there and say, well, I got so unlucky with injuries. I had 3 injuries in my starting guys. And all of a sudden now these guys are going, they're not on the field and whatnot. And now they have a guy that they didn't draft very well. They didn't do much research, and you're getting 10 points a game instead of 20 points a game. But if you sit back and you process the systems and everything that goes into the NFL, it's okay. Well, I'm going to draft this guy instead of this guy, or this guy, whatever. And now I'm getting 15 to 20 points from my bench guy, who is supposed to be a bench guy. In the event of injury, it's just one of those things where it's like, like I said, the reality of it is guys get hurt. We see injuries every single year. It's not anything new. It's just one of those things that happens year in and year out. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't know who is going to get injured. You're never going to be able to predict the guy that's going to get hurt, whether whoever the running back is that gets hurt, whoever the wide receiver is that gets hurt. Like I said, last year we saw Malik Neighbors get hurt week 1. We didn't expect that. We didn't expect Patrick Mahomes to tear his ACL in mid-December. We didn't expect Daniel Jones to tear his Achilles late in the season. We didn't expect Saquon Barkley to not produce we may have expected him to not run for 2,000 yards, but we didn't expect him to run for 1,000. You were hoping for at least 1,500 to 1,600 yards. So everything that comes behind those guys is really the most important part of any fantasy football draft. Those guys that you draft to back those guys up in the event of anything happening. Like I had Saquon Barkley on 3 or 4 of my fantasy teams last year, I think. I sat him midway through the season for a few games just to see where we were at. And it's crazy because like everybody expects these guys with the big names, and everybody expected Saquon Barkley to do extraordinary things, but he really kind of came back down. Like 2,000 yards in a season is crazy for a running back. First of all, there's a reason why it's a very short list of players that have ever reached that height in their career to have a 2,000 yard season. So the way that I think about everything is, okay, I don't expect him to do that again. So I was a little reluctant, but it's still Saquon Barkley. They're in a run heavy offense. He has a very high floor. I didn't expect 1,100 yards. I expected more. Not gonna lie. Very disappointed later on in the season, but the way that I constructed my roster, I had guys behind him to where, okay, I can sit Saquon Barkley this week because I don't like the matchup, with whatever defense he was facing last year, to where I'm okay I can sacrifice 10 points for, the guy behind. I can sacrifice Saquon Barkley's 20 plus points to where, okay, this guy's going to get me 15 plus points. Still pretty good. But that's just kind of the way it goes, is like the probability of injury is just so high in the NFL because, like I said, it's a violent sport. These guys are going to get hurt. It happens. You just don't know who is going to get hurt. You don't know when they're going to get hurt. And as far as fantasy football goes, you just have to be prepared for that in all aspects. And obviously it starts with the draft because you're sitting there, you're looking at a list of players who you're going to draft. Okay, I draft Saquon Barkley in this, late second round or whatever the case may be, or, probably late first, early second, realistically last year. Who do I want to take behind him to where maybe he doesn't perform as well? And that's kind of the point that I'm making is your depth on your fantasy roster is going to win you the championship. It's not your starters. I promise you that right now. I've been in leagues and I have a league that I'm in currently that I think I came in like I didn't win the championship. Let's put it that way. But the point that I'm making is my starting roster was not the same. Or my ending roster on my team was not the same as who I drafted. So it was a whole bunch of trades and waiver wire pickups and everything like that. That is what kept me in the running for a long playoff push and potentially a championship. But that, like I said, that's kind of the premise of the episode today is your depth is going to be the deciding factor, whether it be for bye weeks, for injuries. Don't draft for week 1, draft for week 15, especially late in the season too. Is you have to account for teams sitting their starters, because a lot of teams will do that to save them for the playoff run. You have to be like, I can't tell you how many leagues that I'm a part of that I had an entire starting roster just not play a game because they wanted to rest the starters. So you're left with everybody on your bench, your depth. If you don't have the depth that you need, those weeks they're gonna kill you. They're gonna absolutely kill your fantasy season. And especially if you're a team that might be like on the cusp of making the playoffs, if you don't have the right players in place, then that playoff push can be an absolute nightmare. To where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe. Okay, like the Eagles do it all the time. They sit their starters. And other teams in the league do that too. It's just to save their guys for a deep run in the playoffs. Because obviously the ultimate goal is Super Bowl. So you want your guys healthy. You want all those guys to play well. But when it comes to depth, you have to have it. Week 4, you're really gonna identify the contenders in the league to the guys that are gonna finish at the bottom of the league. It's not because they have the best starters, but it's because they They survive the bye weeks. They survive the injuries. And I can guarantee you this year, and mark my words, I'm going to call it right now, that there will be a significant injury by week 3. To whoever it might be, I don't know. I can't predict who it's going to be, but it will be. It will be someone of significance, someone of that has enough star power that you're just going to be like, I can't believe that my guy got hurt. I'm unlucky. I'm this and that. But the strongest fantasy teams are going to be the ones that are flexible, deep. They can adjust to everything that the league throws at them. The ones that are most prepared, which is why we're here now, right? We prepare now, we win later. So if we can do that, fantasy championships are not won by the perfect starting lineup. They're won by surviving the chaos. If you can survive the bye weeks, survive the injuries, you're going to make a pretty deep playoff push, and I wouldn't be surprised if you win your league. Week 4 doesn't create the problems. It just reveals the holes in your draft. So this is why the fantasy reality check exists. Because we're not, we're not chasing the rankings. We're not chasing the hot takes. We're just being realistic and we're understanding what actually wins a fantasy football championship. And a lot of people are going to argue and say that, oh, fantasy football, it's just fake. It's this and that. But for us that play fantasy football, it means something, because not only does it give you the utmost bragging rights to everybody in your league, but it makes you sit there and go, okay, I really do know what I'm talking about. I really do know what's going on in the NFL, and I'm really aware with how I drafted and who I drafted, and I accounted for every possible scenario. That's how you win championships. Prepare now, win later. And that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you have your depth. We are going to do some mock drafts coming up. We are in June now. I know it's like the lowest period for football related stuff. It's like the lull, the calm before the storm, if you will. We're going to do some mock drafts coming up here in the next few weeks. I'm excited to do those. Kind of get you guys kind of how I think when I draft. I don't have any of my draft positions yet, which is kind of crazy. I thought I would by now. I'd at least have at least one league that I know where I'm drafting. But regardless, so we'll probably just do a mock draft on probably like 10 to 12 man league, to where we'll just do one draft position per draft. We'll start at 1. And where we're going to go with the first pick, and then we'll go all the way through 1 to 10 or 1 to 12, whatever we decide to do there. But yeah, for the most part, make sure you have the depth. Make sure that you can survive the chaos that is going to happen in the NFL. You can't avoid it, and you just don't know who it's going to be. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. So I appreciate y'all for being here for this episode of the Front Office Podcast. I am your host, Pistols. We will be live again probably next Sunday, but who knows? Hit that follow if you haven't already. Make sure you know when we're going to go live, because it could be random. Appreciate everybody for being here. Thank you guys so much for joining me on the Front Office Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.